Welcome into another video. This time we're doing week 3 Thursday night football as the Giants take on the 49ers. I think it's going to be pretty much of a lopsided type of fantasy football game, but I'm still going to dive into it and break it down for you guys. Let's get it. Let's take a look at the fantasy players to watch in this game. First, on the Giants side, the top fantasy players, in my opinion, is just tight end Darren Waller. I mean, the only fantasy asset that I really even want from the Giants in this game is this guy. I mean, he's a tight end that I'm really liking as to what Waller has really brought to the Giants passing game thus far in this season. I mean, he currently leads the team with 13 targets through 2 weeks, and there is a reason why. If you look up and down this roster of pass catchers, all you can see are a bunch of unproven guys. Waller gives Daniel Jones a reliable target week in and week out. They should be leaning heavily on Darren Waller within the pass game just to try to keep pace with the 49ers. Get Waller in your lineup this week. Now let's switch gears and move over to the 49ers, who have been dominating thus far this season. The top fantasy players for this team, in my opinion, are Christian McCaffrey, Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, and George Kittle. I'm not ready to label Brock Purdy as a fantasy starter just yet. Now, don't get me wrong, he is a very good NFL quarterback, but he has yet to show me that he has that 300-yard type of upside consistently. You usually get around 220 to 250 yards passing with either a touchdown or two. I want to be able to see consistent ability to provide solid fantasy upside to this offense, and with Christian McCaffrey a part of the backfield, he just isn't relied on really to carry this offense. Now, speaking of McCaffrey, he is the first player that we're going to go over for the 49ers. This guy is just busting out run after run, and they're really, really big. Now, this is what we really expect from a player of this caliber. You know, McCaffrey should have a field day, really, against the Giants defense, who've been struggling thus far this season in stopping the run. The Giants gave up over 120 yards rushing in week 1 and over 150 yards rushing in week 2. McCaffrey owners should be absolutely drooling over this opportunity that Christian McCaffrey has this week. It doesn't get more set it and forget it than this. Now, next we do have Deebo Samuel. Samuel, who has way more involved last week than he was in week 1. He led the way with 9 targets and even had 5 carries. So the Giants boast the 9th best pass defense in the NFL, but I do believe there's a good chance Deebo Samuel posts another solid fantasy outing this week against the Giants. Next is Brandon Ayuk. He came down to earth last week after lighting the fantasy football world on fire in week 1. He had 6 targets but only 3 receptions for 43 yards last week. It won't get any easier this week going against a good pass defense, but Brandon Ayuk is still a fantasy target and should be in your lineups this week. It's rare to see both Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk both flourish in the same week, but you want to be starting the one who's going to get to be able to light it up. Get Brandon Ayuk in your lineup and hope that this will be his week to shine. Last but not least, for the fantasy players I'm watching in this week is Thursday Night Football, George Kittle. Kittle has been quiet the first 2 weeks of the fantasy season, but if y'all remember what I talked about in this offseason, George Kittle is a classic boom or bust kind of player. He has a very high ceiling, but also a low floor. Any given week, you could see Kittle break the entire slate. On the other weeks, he will be a disappointment. You know, there's really isn't any in between with Kittle. There's no way you can bench Kittle, so get him in your lineup and pray he goes nuclear. Just like there's players that I would target for fantasy in this game, there's also some sleepers that I could target that could have a nice game for your flex spot. For the Giants, I could see Daniel Jones, Matt Breida, and Darius Slayton as fantasy viable. Now, Daniel Jones is going against a very tough 49ers defense, but they do rank towards the bottom as far as pass defense goes, just due to everyone needing to throw the ball towards the end of the game because they are losing. Now, Daniel Jones does have the ability to rack up 300 yards passing in any given game, but as far as Matt Breida goes, Saquon Barkley ended up limping off the field at the end of the game last week and is expected to miss 3 weeks from a sprained ankle. Now, while Barkley has yet to be ruled out and is officially a game time decision, even though the coach is saying that they're going to wait all the way up until the last minute to make that decision, you know, Matt Breida will most likely be the number 1 running back this week. That's just what I believe. Now, this by no means is a good thing for Breida. The 49ers have one of the best run defenses in the NFL, and Breida will find fantasy points hard to come by. I still have him as a sleeper just based on the opportunity that he's going to have. Now, Lastly, I have Darius Slayton, who has had 6 targets last week, 5 targets in week 1. The Giants are going to need to throw the ball often to even have a slim bit of a chance in this matchup, and Slayton is someone who is being given an opportunity to catch the ball. If you're in need of a sleeper this week, Slayton should be your man. Now, for the 49ers, I can see Brock Purdy having a chance at becoming an okay asset if you're in a pinch. As I stated before, Purdy really isn't consistent enough as a fantasy producer for me to place him as far as my stamp of approval just yet. He needs to continue to develop and to be able to produce 280 to 300 yards passing week in and week out. Until then, I'm just going to keep him on my sleeper list. At the end of the day, anyone can go off and be a fantasy asset for your team, and it's ultimately up to you to decide who you put into your lineups. I can't wait to see you guys on the next video. We'll see you guys next time.